Welcome back. Ty, so I got to make some changes to the intro because number one, I told you about my kid getting on the microphone and doing the whole intro, and I was like horrified. I'm like, where did you hear that? And why are you listening to the show? And I don't know if his kid's at school, but somehow he's doing that. Also, I ran into somebody the other day that was like, hey man, love The Expanse. We listen to your podcast. And he goes, and then when you like blow the mic on that, and I was like, what? And so when we do this, I don't think about like other people. I just think like we're all hanging out talking. I don't think there's actually people watching this. So when somebody at Home Depot is like, dude, when you're blowing the mic, like what's going on with that? And I'm like, well, I'm just trying to make Ty laugh.
That's good mic technique.
Yeah. So, anyway,
what am I doing here? Why did we agree to this, man?
Actually, and also we can't do this either because we got the boss man in the house. We got Sugar Naren Shankar, and we got Father Daniel Abraham. And today is a very, very special episode. Very special because it is the last episode of Ty and That Guy, talking about the last episode of the Expanse series. Hello, everybody.
Hey, how you doing?
Yeah. Hello, Daniel.
Glad we could start on a high note. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No, yeah, you're not.
Joseph, you might need to cut that out, though. That's no,
that stays in.
Yeah.
Go out with a bang,
I like that Wes has good technique.
Oh God!
Technique.
We're off to a great start. This is the beginning.
So I'm hearing you say there's no HR department involved in this. This is a
yeah. You know what? Right. And that's the great thing about the show being over. HR can't touch me anymore. No more complaints coming my way. I say no more. There was never any complaints.
Who are you working for now?
Oh shit. Yeah, they're a lot more corporate. They're a lot more corporate than what we had going on over there. How you guys been? I miss you guys. I mean, it's been a long. How long has it been since we've talked?
God, a while.
Last time I saw you were down in southern New Mexico filming.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. You came to visit me. We had a little lunch. Got caught up. That was nice. I saw Naren in L.A. Ty, what are we talking about today?
Apparently, microphone technique. how to pleasure your microphone.
Yeah.
And then, to a lesser extent, we were going to talk about the last Amazon episode of The Expanse to date. We'll see what happens, but episode 6 of season 6. I don't remember what it was called.
Babylon's Ashes.
Yeah, no, I know. I have. We also have a book.
It's called The Expanse. Where did the title come from?
The book title? Well, the episode title came from the book title. Naren had always done that the last episode of every season had the title of the book that it was based on. So that was true for all 6 seasons.
Meaning, like, where did the title from originally? Where did it come from? Is there a meaning behind it?
I mean, Babylon is the great empire of the past, and so the idea being that after the events of book 5 and season 5, the great empire has fallen, and so we're now living in the ashes of the previous empire. And I'm a big classical and pre-classical history guy, so the idea of living in the ruins of a fallen empire is something we don't really think about now, but it was, for a lot of people in ancient times, it was literally true that you would be living in buildings and forts and houses that were built by an empire that didn't exist anymore. They were just gone, but the stuff was still there. They had left all this stuff behind. And I think the closest analog we have now is people who live in countries that used to be part of the Soviet Union, and they still have Soviet Union stuff, but the Soviet Union is gone. But they still have like military buildings that they built and warehouses full of AK-47s and nuclear missiles and stuff. But the empire is gone. They just have their leftover stuff now.
When we were doing the Mockingjay movies, I remember we were shooting in Berlin, and there were certain areas, like there was an old abandoned train station that we shot at, and the train station was just to deliver munitions and ammunition, and so there was still like faded swastika symbols and stuff on the wall, and there was like old missile silos that we would shoot in, and there's all these symbols and stuff from the past, or old barracks and stuff, and it was so spooky and eerie, but it goes to what you're talking about now.
That train station you shot in, is that the one where you destroyed their very expensive prop train?
It is. Yes. Good memory. Yes, that's one of the many props that I broke on that set. That's a good memory.
Living in the ruins.
Yeah.
Living in the ruins of the last empire.
Or living in the ruins of the one to come.
Yes.
Not you. You moved away.
Dude, everywhere you live is a graveyard in one respect or another.
Yeah.
So I just watched this last episode, and my question is, I've gotten to know you guys over the years. You guys have strong values, principles, and all good writing has a strong point of view. There's something that you're saying. My question to you, Daniel and Ty, when you sat down to start writing The Expanse, when you had the first idea, did that moral philosophy, was that a part of the beginning, or was it as over time just who you are on a subconscious level just bled through to, ultimately throughout the Expanse story as you told it?
I don't know that we ever wrote anything to espouse any particular moral philosophy.
Well, is there? I mean, but there's something. There's a point of view. There's something that you're saying.
There were some decisions that we made early on about things like who made it into space and what the future looked like, and there were some aesthetic decisions we made about storytelling. Like if you go through The Expanse, you're going to find a weird absence of sexual violence. That was that was a storytelling choice that we made.
Yeah.
There was very little debate.
I wouldn't say
about
weird.
that.
I would say unusual.
Yeah.
Unusual. Fair.
Fair.
Healthy. How about healthy?
Yeah.
Healthy.
I think if we hadn't kind of been on the same wavelength to start with, we probably wouldn't have been able to do very many books together.
Yeah, but this is an important point, that rather than pick a particular moral philosophy and make all of the characters, an echo chamber for that philosophy, what Daniel and I were much more interested in doing is reminding people that everyone thinks their moral philosophy is right, no matter what they're doing, and take the time to really look at every character from the inside and see why they think they're doing the right thing, even when we from the outside are going, that seems like the wrong thing that you're doing. From the inside, from their perspective, it's right. That way you don't wind up just sort of standing on a soapbox and preaching to your audience, which we never wanted to do. Yeah. We wanted to make all the characters feel like they had a real point of view.
But I guess what I'm saying, so like the moment in episode 6, season 6, when Holden resigns his position and he gives it to Drummer, and ultimately, what I get from that, and what I get from the overall, what kind of moved me about The Expanse is, in order for humanity to progress or even survive, the powerful is going to have to share power with the powerless at some point. And so that moment, when I look back to the whole series, builds to that moment. And the choice and the decision that Holden makes, to me, is the climax of that season and that arc. So my question is this a conscious thing in the beginning as you're crafting this, or does this come out as your characters are progressing and the plot is progressing and things like that?
I mean, we didn't have that moment planned.
Because the story of The Expanse, like who you guys are, your values, your principles, is expressed through the story. You might not think that you have that, that's something that is a goal of yours, but that's what comes through.
Well, you can't avoid that, though, right?
Right, exactly.
I mean,
so that's what I'm saying is like, how conscious and subconscious is that?
I think Daniel and I both consciously believe that the only way to help disempowered people is to empower them. And you can't just make mouth noises about empowering people. You can't just say, and when that last conversation around the table between Drummer and Holden and Avasarala and the Martians about what the future is going to look like, and Drummer says, I won't be reasoned back into my place. I won't be put in a position where you claim that I have an equal share, and then the system is designed to make sure my share never actually amounts to anything. Because often what we've seen in history is we talk about empowering people, we talk about giving people an equal share, and then systemically we make sure that what we called an equal share never is. And that's what Drummer's responding to is, I know that you guys do this, I'm not going to let you do it to me.
And that's the point I'm making is what you said there was the answer to the question that I had, because what you were talking about earlier is character perspective. Like, of course, character perspective think they're doing the right thing. But what the piece is saying overall, like the things that are coming through, everything is saying something. And that's what's saying something to me. And I think that's what's very moving about The Expanse and what people are responding to.
I will say in that moment, even though Vasarala and Drummer are at odds, Vasarala thinks she's doing the right thing. She actually thinks she's helping the Belters there. She thinks she is giving them a seat at the table and believes that she's doing the right thing. And she is blinded by, to some degree, her own experience and the history of how humans have interacted with each other. She's sitting there, trust me, I'll do the right thing. And Drummer's saying, there's 10,000 years of human history where trust me, I'll do the right thing ends with me getting fucked. Right?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And I even think that's a really nice moment for Avasarala at the end when she realizes that what Holden did. And when she says to Holden, I will undo this. The old Avasarala will fucking undo this, you know? And so the new Avasarala, it was almost like, you motherfucker, you know, it was almost, but it didn't have the same, you know, it was like a completion of a journey, of an emotional journey that she had. So it didn't have the same threat to it. She was more open to it because of everything she's been through to get her to this process. But the Avasarala that was hanging Belters on hooks, when she says, I will undo this, she's going to fucking undo this.
I honestly, for me, that moment, and Naren and Daniel can weigh in on this too, because we all sort of wrote this together. For me, that moment is less about Avasarala being pissed about Holden doing something and more about her being pissed that he outplayed her.
Yeah. Right.
She doesn't like being outplayed.
I would agree with that. It's the end of that episode is one of my favorites too, because there's so much more of the show left after the big battle. Like when you actually just watch, it's like there's like 15 minutes of the episode left. And what do we end with on The Expanse? We end with a long political conversation that is absolutely riveting. I love that scene with all of them around the table, and then this great little surprise at the end with Holden and Vasarala, like before we even get to the ending. I mean, there's a whole lot of diplomacy that goes on after, you know, Marco gets eaten by the entities there. So it's really a fun way to end the show.
I agree with that, and I think that media has taught us that the big battle is the end of the story.
Yep.
It almost never is. You know, the actual end of the story, and Daniel wrote this line way back in the books, and we used it in the show, is, you know, the war isn't over until people reconcile, and that's the moment of reconciliation. So we won the war, we beat the enemy army, but that's not the end now. Now we all have to sit at a table and we have to find a way to be friends from now on. Mm-hmm. And so many stories skip that piece of it that we really wanted to make sure that we told that part of the story. These people have to sit and talk. They have to have a conversation that lets them continue to be friends now that the war is over. Otherwise, we're just fighting again in a year.
Was Drummer aware that was, or was she completely surprised, just like Avasarala?
Oh, Drummer knew it was coming.
In the episode?
Yeah, was she aware that what Holden was going to do?
The way we played it was she looks at him at the table when Avasarala makes the offer to take over the Union, and she's kind of giving him permission to go for it. The implication in the show is afterwards, Drummer and Holden got together and say, we're going to do this.
Yeah, we definitely imply that they sort of schemed together a little bit. Yeah.
I mean, the way I watch it as a viewer, it feels to me like Drummer in the moment in the conference room is realizing that this is the best deal that she's going to get, and that she has come to trust Holden's good intentions in that moment, because I don't think they can be communicating by telepathy and understand that they're going to put one over on Avasarala in that moment. But that's sort of how I interpret it. That's certainly the way we cut it.
I think, yeah. I remember talking to Stephen and saying, you know, Holden's whole arc through the series was in the pilot turning down a job from a place of immaturity, and in the finale turning down a job from a place of maturity. Yeah,
and that's kind of what I'm talking about. You know, like what you had. But did you chart that course early on, or was that something that kind of revealed itself as time went on?
Well, in the books, we knew that was Holden's story. Is the guy who tries to find those paths to reconciliation.
But we also know that we also had 3 more books of his story before we get to where we're actually taking him. So,
Isn't the trick that we were ending the series that hadn't ended yet? Kind of. I mean, that's sort of what we were doing.
Right.
Well, but I was arguing for that last moment with Holden and Naomi being kind of the out for that season and for the for a long. Because
we've been talking about that for years. Yes,
it's such a nice moment of pause.
And and then all the shit's running through Holden's head, and he's like, the proto-molecules out there, and she's just like, shut the fuck up. This has been 7 years, 6 seasons. Take a minute. And then it's a nice moment because it is a pause. There's life will go on beyond this, and the adventures will continue, but it's to have that moment, to have that pause.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to ask you guys about, because it's been a while since I've seen the season and watching the episode, what exactly was because I don't really remember the build up to season 6 of the episodes, but with Philippe, was Rosenfeld like the straw that broke his back to really seeing what Marco was and kind of abandoning that? Like, what was the thing that he ultimately left his father for? And I know it was a build up of, a lot of things, but what was the thing at the end?
I don't remember.
I think you're so obviously Naomi had planted some seeds of doubt.
Yeah.
And over the course of those 2 seasons, we see those seeds take root. But I think you're right. I think it's perceptive. His father's lack of concern when one of his closest lieutenants and friends is killed, and the way he sees that as like, well, she died for me, so it was a good death. And remembering his mother saying, he wouldn't die for you, but he'd let you die for him. And he's seeing that with Rosenfeld, that Marco would never have jumped in front of a bullet for Rosenfeld, but he was perfectly happy to let Rosenfeld take one for him. And Philip realizing that everything that his mother had said about Marco is true. Like, and the blinders just come off, the veil comes away, and he finally sees his father for what he really is for the first time.
I would argue that that's working in Philip the entire season. That is underneath everything. He doesn't want to admit it. And what's happening is he sees the behavior over and over and over again from his father, and he finally understands that this is who the guy is. And that love that he has for his son is not real love.
Watching this again, I love the choice of Marco's demise, because as I'm watching this, I'm like, I didn't remember exactly, like, and I was like, I hope he doesn't go down like in a blaze of glory, like, because that would just fit Marco. Like, even if he went down as like a brave captain, it's like, no, they woke up the entity gods and they were just like, and they just wiped his existence away. It was like Etch a Sketch. So this guy who's like believes he is a god gets a real god, just wipes him off, like completely erases existence with like the flip of a hand. And so all the stuff that he was working towards.
The fun part of that, though, is combining that with Naomi believing she kills her own son.
That's I mean, for certain values of fun, I guess.
Awesome.
That was hilarious.
Wow, you know what I mean.
The point when you cut to Dom and the baby, like so like, oh my god, here's the violence. Oh, here it comes. Oh, remember, it's her kid.
It's your baby.
And after all of the point we made halfway through the season about Holden not being the guy who's going to push the button, making Naomi be the guy who pushes the button.
It's brutal, but in a sense, she's the only one who really can. Right? She's the one who has to make that decision. But I will say that so mass media, and I'm not bashing any particular movie or show here, but we have been programmed to believe that the end of every villain's arc is a fist fight on a catwalk, right?
Right.
That the way a villain is defeated is all of his protection is taken away and he's left alone, and he has to face off with the hero, and the hero and the villain get in a fight, and the villain is thrown off the catwalk or whatever. It's that classic moment. We kind of make fun of that moment with Holden and Murtry in season 4, the gunfight on the catwalk, right?
Yeah.
And so there are a lot of people who thought that needed to be the end for Marco, that the end for Marco needed to be Holden and Marco facing off in some big battle. where it comes down mano a mano. It's the two of them. And that never can be the end of Marco. The end of Marco has to be what you said, where he wants to see himself a certain way, and his ending is the moment when he realizes he's not. Yeah. And that moment, like you said, when I am a god, and then an actual god shows up, and you go, oh, fuck, I was never a god. Why was I saying that?
I pictured like just some fiery god in bed and like being woken up and just like wiping him off existence. But you're right, Ty. I think that if he would have had that like high noon moment with Holden, it would have been satisfying to me. It'd be more than what Marco deserved. And it's like, to really, like, the way that he died was the most satisfying for me. And somebody that watched Marco for these 3 seasons or 2 seasons, is wanting him just to be insignificant, to just be completely the antithesis of what he thought he was.
Yeah, well, and in the books, when we describe the being eaten by the entities, you're aware of it the entire time, and the moment seems to go on forever. So he's trapped in an eternal hell where he is being eaten by entities.
Of being nothing, of being insignificant. And it's Admiral Duarte, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, I really love the conversation he had where he's like, yeah, I'm done with you. I don't need you anymore. Stay the fuck out of there, you know?
That's the other layer that's stripped away from Marco, because the thing that Philip realizes when he leaves is that his father sees everyone as an accessory in his life. Right? They don't have their own lives. They don't have their own things. They are accessories that he uses or doesn't use as he chooses. So nobody's a real person. And that moment when he's talking to Duarte, and Duarte goes, you were an accessory. I used you. I'm done with you now, so I'm throwing you away, is the first time Marco has had anyone do that to him.
So good. And then he plays it off like it didn't happen.
Yeah. Anyway, Daniel, what were you trying to say?
That was Duarte.
It's fine.
I have no idea what I was going to say. I'm probably very, very smart.
It was probably smart, for sure.
I'm so glad that you guys incorporated Strange Dogs and Admiral Duarte and the whole story there, because there was so much about the protomolecule, and it was such an important part of the story, and it needed to be there. But I would imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, in the beginning of the season, was there any talks about like just stay focused on the Rossi and the Mars and the Marco bit?
It was one of we got a fair amount of pushback, I would say, on the Strange Dog storyline, and you know, it's one of those things that when you start talking about, oh my God, it's going to be expensive to make, it's hard to do, all of these things, there's a lot of reasons that people say, why don't you just take that out? It'll solve all the problems. And our feeling was, it was so important on the protomolecule side. It was so important for filling in a huge amount of the story that we left hanging. It would have been left hanging otherwise from the end of season 5 when they go through the ring and that ship disappears. It just wouldn't have been addressable in any real way. And also, we wanted to kind of tee up the last 3 books of the series. And you needed all of these things. And it does come back and touch the storyline in an unexpected way that gives it meaning at the end of 6 episodes. So, you know, I think had we had more episodes in the show in season 6, you know, I think it might have changed how we did it or opened up some possibilities to do like a full episode on Laconia. There's any number of things that could have been done in interesting ways. We just didn't have the real estate for the season.
And it was also, I mean, don't forget, we were filming that in the absolute teeth of COVID.
Exactly.
There were a lot of thoughts and plans and things that we could have done if we could have done them, but since we couldn't, we did something else. I think those choices all worked, but you create what you can create given the obstacles.
Is there any character or anything about The Expanse where people kind of took it away that you did not intend? Where you're like, no, that's not supposed to be that way. No, that's not what we were trying to say with that.
Everybody, especially in the first 3 or 4 seasons or 3 or 4 books, were picking a faction. Everybody was picking a faction. Are you Mars? Are you Belt? I'm a Belter. It's like, well, you should read book 5 first.
Daniel, I still remember Daniel telling me, it's like, because I was reading the books as the show went on, and we were looking at like some pictures of people who had gotten like amazing belter tattoos. and Daniel looked at me. He said, I wonder how that guy's going to feel in book 5. And I go, what happens in book 5? He goes, the belters kill millions of people. They become the bad guys.
The central. You were talking early on about moral philosophy, Wes. The central philosophical treatise of the books is factionalism is bad.
Yeah,
that's what I was asked. That was the question I was asking you earlier. It's like, what are those things? Because
factionalism is bad.
Because Holden has a great speech at the meeting at the end where he says, "Look, Marco's evil, but he's inevitable. He's a symptom of the way that we treat these people. And if you do not give real power, if you do not share power, this is going to continue. There's going to be more Marcos out there." And that is kind of going to your point of what you're saying, or your overall it's a strong theme throughout the Expanse. And so it's...
Holden and Fred have a conversation in the show. Holden says, Earth, Mars, the belt, that's all wrong. There shouldn't be sides.
Yeah.
And Fred is a soldier and a politician, so his response is very realpolitik, right? It's like, that's a nice dream, but everybody has to pick a side. Yeah, everybody has to pick a side. So, and that is sort of the realpolitik view of the world is, we would all love there to be peace and no sides, but of course we all are going to pick sides. And Holden is the idealist. He's the one who goes, if we could just get past that, if we could just stop forming factions of picking sides, all of this just goes away. And that's what he's trying to do at the end of season 6. He's trying to create a way for them to do that. Having said that is the central sort of premise of the book. A whole bunch of people read the books and picked a side.
And we get pretty weird with that idea in book 9 too. I mean there's some holes in that theory too.
What's beautiful about the ending is this idea that ultimately Holden does pick a side, right? He fights on a particular side, but at the end he's able to essentially forgive and say and let go of recriminations and hatred and everything else. And it's like that is an important part of reconciliation, right? It's like somebody has to choose to like not hold a grudge. Somebody has to choose not to take revenge. And that's the moment where you can break the cycle. Otherwise you're screwed.
Yeah, well, that's Miller talking about Holden says is that, in season 4 says, is there anybody you're not trying to save? And the side Holden will pick is very easy to predict. It's whichever side he thinks is going to kill the fewest people. That's always the side he's going to go with, right? What side do I have to get on so that there are fewer bodies on the ground at the end of this? And that's why he switches sides all the time, because who's going to stack the most bodies changes very situationally. And so, yes, he was on sort of the Earth-Mars coalition side in the war against Marco, because Marco had just killed billions of people. That doesn't mean he's going to stay on their side. And so when you get into the meeting room afterwards, Earth and Mars are presenting this united front against the Belters, and Holden's looking at that and going, what Earth and Mars are doing right now, that's going to create more bodies in the future. So now I'm on the Belt side. And that's just sort of how his philosophy takes him through life.
Do you remember the board game?
Yeah.
Remember the Expanse board game? The thing that I loved about that when they were building it was the mechanic is the Rocinante is a particular buff in the game, and whoever is losing gets it.
Yeah.
Whoever's behind gets the Rossi on their side.
Yeah, which is very philosophically correct for
that is in
the
keeping
story
with the show.
Yeah, because Holden's always going to fight for the underdogs. Yep.
An independent ship, as one would say.
I think the action sequence in this is one of my favorite action sequence. And
the action sequence, good lord, man.
Yeah.
Amos in the chair is my favorite is one of my favorite sequences in the entire show.
Oh, by the way, and I'm sure you guys have talked about this, and I'm sure it's been everywhere, but having all the characters' names from every sci-fi thing that I've ever loved in the thing, you go through and you read that. You guys didn't tell me about that, and then I was like, I was watching.
Thanks Sumit for that.
Yeah,
that's Sumit. Sumit Vats, who was our graphic design, the guy who designed all the ship graphics and that kind of stuff.
Oh, did he just put the names in there? Did he just do the?
Yeah.
I think we actually put some of it in dialogue, but he ran with it. I think we talked about it. We talked about it because we were aping the screens from Aliens, of course.
Yes.
It's like that's what we were doing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there was Aliens, there was Blade Runner, there was a lot of
Star Trek.
There's some stuff I've never even seen, but Sumit has seen it. Yeah. So there was a few names where I had to read like fan explanations of who they were because it was a name Sumit and his team had put in that I'd never even heard of.
Put my first karate instructor in there.
Did you really? Action reveals character, and having that scene be the action coming through the end of the arc for this specific period in time was just so beautiful, and it was so emotionally moving. If action sequence don't have that character motivation or that truth behind it, you don't feel anything, right? Yep. And this one was really emotional watching it because you know where Amos came from to get to the point where he's doing what he's doing now with Bobby, with everybody, and then there's that great, Han Solo Millennium Falcon moment where, the Rossi comes out and saves Bobby, and then it's like everybody's looking out for everything. We were a complete family, complete thing, and it's just fucking beautiful. It's just really well done.
Yeah, and it was actually, that moment was pretty hard to deal with because it's so emotionally satisfying, and it's also a loss. I mean, it's also that sense of, oh my God, they all made it. Oh wait, they're fucked.
Yeah.
So there was a tension there that I really liked.
Well, and it was on the storytelling side, it was a tension that we had to really craft because a lot of the people who read the outlines early on, like studio execs and network execs, they didn't get that. They thought it was a win. Like, yay, we win. This is the big we won moment, and we kept having to say, no, this is our characters that we like live. And they disable these guns, but now they're dead, and they know it. Yeah,
there were interesting changes in that one, and it was a tricky one to write because in our 6-episode season, we actually wrote episodes 1 and 6 simultaneously.
Yeah,
right, because we had to shoot them in the very first block because Breck Eisner was doing both of them, and so there were things in the episode that we just kind of hadn't quite figured out yet. I mean, it was like Amos and Bobby, for example. That scene came very late. We talked about that one in particular, and it was that whole episode was tricky to pull off. There was changes in terms of how we envisioned the story. At one point, we had all of those battles happening simultaneously. We cut them. We kind of had them all occurring, drummers battle, and it was happening sort of simultaneously with with Amos and Holden, everybody into the ring.
That wasn't possible to do because we couldn't have her fight Marco.
We were there were times when it was jumbled up, and we ended up actually sort of landing on these almost like vignettes, and what it did was it just sort of it just allowed you to sort of deepen the emotion all the way through the episode. It was like you have that scene with the Rossi gang on the ship, just having that meal together, and it's like, with the specter of, all dying in this horrible battle hanging over, and it allowed the episode to build really, really well over the course of that, supersized whatever it ended up being, like 20 minutes over.
You talk about the dinner with the Rocinante, and I think it's really interesting that Peaches is the one that made the dinner for everyone. And in the beginning, when we first see Peaches, just like when she's a destroyer, and then she becomes a fixer, and she's the one that's kind of putting it together and bringing people together. And it's a nice moment for Amos because in watching this, because now I have a lot of perspective because I haven't watched it in a long time, and I watched this episode and watching it today, and I remember some of the first images of Amos with Naomi where Naomi was his boss. I mean, he called her boss, and it was on many different levels. His relationship to her, she was his North Star. He depended on her in many levels. And now he is a North Star for somebody. He is somebody's boss. And he is through the love and relationships that he's had with the family of the Rocinante, it is even on a subconscious level, changed him to where now he can be somebody's boss, somebody's tool. And so there's a moment when she's at the microwave and she says to Amos, somebody that doesn't want to be a hero, you're really, I don't remember the exact lines, but you're doing a lot of this fucking, and then it hits him for the first time. Wait a minute. Am I being like Holden? Am I being, like this? Am I being, this thing? And then she makes dinner for everybody, which was Alex's kind of thing, bringing people together. And she's kind of filling in that spot. And then there's that, you guys let it breathe, of just sitting there and allowing the family to be together and feeling what everyone has been through to get to that point right before they go into this epic battle.
You mentioned about Clarissa, she starts out, she's a breaker of things, and then she turns into a fixer of things. There's a line in the book that I don't remember if I wrote it or Daniel wrote it. I don't remember.
We'll never know.
Equal credit for it, I guess.
Yeah.
Where someone is noticing that Clarissa's constantly checking the seals on all the airlocks. She's going through the ship and she's always like working on it. And they mention this, and Naomi says she broke something on the ship once and she'll never be done fixing it. And it is that moment of recognition of this is the penance. That this is how you do penance, is you become the person who fixes things. And
we set that up in season 3 in the prison with Pastor Anna. Yep. With Pastor Anna, when Pastor Anna is saying, when Chris is saying, you should have let Amos kill me, and she's no easy way out for you. You take the hard way. Right. And that's the hard way. The hard way is you hang around and you fix it.
Eat shit and sleep. What was that? What's that speech? Was another.
That's right, in the prison.
I'm curious, and you guys can tell me off air if you don't want to give anything in the books. But I haven't read past the book that we shot.
Okay, there's a bunch more stuff in.
There's a lot more that happens.
A lot coming.
Well, what happens in the immediate with Peaches? Because it says that she has 5 years to live.
That's a little bit of a change on the script side. She's definitely, her health is degenerating in the books, but there's no sort of like time limit on it.
So wait, you don't know how Amos ends.
No.
What?
But what's funny is
when come on, you don't know that? Oh boy.
No, when people come up, I need to read it, but people come up to me. People always come up to me. They'll say, we love the show, whatever, and they go, "Have you read the last books? Do you know what happens to Amos?" And I'm like, "No, what happens?" And they're like, "I'm not gonna fucking tell you. I'm not gonna tell you." And so it's kind of a thing where it's like, well, I don't want to, I don't want to, read something and get, what I'm saying? If you get your hopes up for something and it, he doesn't get
no, that's not going to change. That's not going to change. That's not
Well, it won't change my hopes. Is that what you're saying?
You should read the books.
There's no way that's ever going to change. The ending's just too good.
Yeah, no,
no, I'm saying I don't want to get my hopes up and then we never shoot it. I don't want to, like, that's why.
But you read books all the time that you're not the starring in.
Yeah, but that's the thing is, like, so every time I read a book for The Expanse, this is my ritual. We shoot a season, and then about 3 months before we do the other season, I sit down and read the book. And then I get so emotionally caught up and excited in it because I know now we're going to go shoot that book. Right. And so every season we did that. So when season 6 ended, I was like, okay, I can't read further because if I sit down to read the book after 6, then I might be like, oh fuck, like I'll be in the habit and the pattern of like, we go and shoot this now.
So we got to get somebody to pick it up so you can read the book.
You got to read the book. Got to do that.
We'll get somebody to do it so you can read those books because you got to read the book.
I mean, you're gonna be bummed though because we have to recast everybody.
Yeah.
So somebody else will be doing all the awesome parts.
As long as it gets shot. As long as it gets shot. You need to get 30 years older. 30.
Yeah, I mean, I'll finally be able to get Kevin Durant, who is, who I wanted to get.
No, he's the same age. No, you got to get like, Nick Nolte. Hey, Amos has had a hard life.
Hard living, baby.
Like, think about it. Like, wouldn't that be great? Because all the time Amos spends in the brothels and spends in the, and I'm sure he's going to do a lot of celebrating in the next 30 years. Like, wouldn't it be great if Nick Nolte shows up?
You know what would be amazing? If we cast Nick Nolte for Amos, but everybody else is the same.
Everybody else is the
Everybody
same.
else is the same.
and people just keep going, man, that guy has really let himself go. He's aged.
Hey, watch this. The listeners on this show, there will be a photo of the Rossi crew and Nick Nolte for me. The thing.
That would be awesome.
That definitely will happen,
Yeah.
Like, Amos, after 30 years of fighting in bars and going to brothels.
Hey, boss, the fuels, the capacitors, we need to work on it. The generosity of women never ceases to amaze me.
It's one of my favorite lines in that movie.
Thank you, Patreons, for supporting the show. Thank you guys for hanging out. We love you. This is going to be running long, so we're just going to break this up into 2 parts, and this is the ending of the first part. You want to add anything, Ty?
Anything, Ty.
Say goodbye.
Goodbye.